So, good morning, class. I am teacher Joshua, and with me are teachers Maharlika and teacher Zarina. And we are your teachers for today. So, before we start, may I call Miss Christine Casalia to lead the prayer?
Let's bow our head
Miss
and feel
Atid.
the presence. Let's bow our head and feel the presence of the Lord. Father God, come be with us today. Fill our hearts with joy. Fill our minds with learning. Fill our classrooms with peace. Fill our lessons with fun. Fill our friendships with kindness. Fill our school with love. Amen.
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 Thank you, Miss Hatid. Thank you, Miss Hatid. Class, class secretary, may I know who's absent today?
None so far, sir.
Okay, very well. All right, class. Since this is just the third time we've met, I would like to remind you of our classroom management protocols. Since we are having classes virtually, I request that everyone must open their cameras and mute their mic unless you want to speak. This brings me to the second rule, but that whenever you want to speak, please press the raise button first and wait for your name to be called. Third is to always be interactive and participative all throughout the discussion. Last but not the least is to behave accordingly. Be well-mannered and polite, pay attention, and uphold honesty and integrity in all your works. Are we clear?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Well then, settle yourselves so we can begin. Last week, we talked about Newton's second law of motion, and the week before that, we also learned about Newton's first law of motion. Am I right?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Just a short recap of what we studied previously. What again is Newton's first law of motion? Yes, Miss Marvelita? Marvelita disconnected. So, can we have a helping hand? Miss Perlita, do you mind helping Miss Marvelita?
Okay. Yes, sir. Sir, an example. Sorry. Sir, Newton's first law of motion, which is the law of inertia, states that an object at rest stays at rest, and an object in motion tends to stay in motion with the same speed and in the same direction unless acted upon by an external net force.
Very good, Miss Perlita. Can you please give an example of this law and explain how the first law of motion is being applied here?
Sir, an example is this magic spring I have with me. This spring remains still because I am just holding it in my hand, or it is just resting on my palm. But once I exert a force on it by pushing it, as you can see, sir, the spring will elongate, covering a short distance. Therefore, it moves downward.
Good explanation, Miss Perlita. What about the second law of motion? Miss Riza, please answer.
Sir, Newton's second law of motion is also called the law of acceleration. It states that the acceleration of an object as produced by a net force inversely proportional to the mass of the object.
Perfect. If that's the case, can someone cite an application of this law and explain? Yes, Miss Christine.
Sir, since acceleration is inversely proportional to the mass of the object, this only means that the heavier the object, the lesser the acceleration. Also, since the force is directly proportional to acceleration, it only goes to show that acceleration depends on the amount of net force acting upon an object.
Example, Miss Christine, please cite an example.
Sir, as an example, let's say two persons applying the same force are pushing two identical carts towards the same direction. But the other cart carries 20 kilograms of items, while the other cart carries only 5 kilograms of items. Naturally, as the second law applies, the person who pushes the cart containing the lighter items accelerates easier and faster than the person who pushes the cart with heavier items.
Very good. In the second law of motion, the acceleration of an object is dependent upon two variables. And those are the net force acting upon an object and the mass of the object. On the other hand, the first law of motion talks about the tendency of a body to remain its present state of motion, either to remain stationary or to remain in motion. In both cases, the acceleration is zero. What does it imply if acceleration is zero? Ms. Perlita?
Sir, it implies that the forces are balanced and the object will be in equilibrium.
Good job, students. I think you are now ready for the next lesson, and that is Newton's third law of motion. So here's our class objectives for the lesson. Can you see my screen, class?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So at the end of this lesson, you must be able to state and explain Newton's third law of motion, reflect and relate the concept of the third law of motion into real-life situations, and give and illustrate the forces that act upon the body. So, having said all of these, let's test your prior knowledge of the lesson. Please prepare a writing pad and a thick readable pen for writing. Are you ready, class? Have you prepared the items that I have enumerated? Class, are you ready?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So, we will have a short quiz. So, these are the instructions for our short quiz. Answer each question I will read to you by writing down your pads. Then show your answers by flashing your pad or papers on the screen. Do you understand? Class, do you understand?
Yes, sir.
So this is the first question. If in the first and second laws of motion, there is only one force involved, how many force or forces is or are involved in the third law of motion? I will give you 5 seconds to answer. Okay, time's up.
Done na, sir.
Please show your answers. Show your answers, class. Class, show your answers.
Sir, letter B.
Letter B,
Okay.
sir.
The answer is B. Forces come in pairs, so there are two forces that must be present. So, question number 2. Can a push and a pull happen at the same time in the law of interaction? A, yes. B, no. C, yes, but in the absence of acceleration. Or D, no, if the acceleration is 0. I will give you 5 seconds to answer. Okay, time is up. Please show your answers, class. Okay. The correct answer is B. In the third law of motion, there should only be one line of action, either just by pulling or pushing. Question number 3. Newton's third law of motion states that in every action force, there is blank. A, an equal and opposite reaction force. B, an unbalanced force. C, an equal and pointing towards the same direction force. Or D, an equal and unbalanced force. I will give you 5 seconds to answer. Time's up. Please show your answers. I guess everybody knows the answer here. It is letter A, an equal and opposite reaction force. Okay, question number 4. Consider a fish swimming forward in the ocean. Which of the following describes the basic action-reaction forces between the fish and the water? Is it letter A, force of the fish points back while the force of the water points forward? Letter B, the force of the fish points forward while the force of the water points back. Letter C, the force of the fish points upward while the force of the water pulls downward. Or letter D, the forces of point in the same direction because in liquid media behave differently than in air. I will give you 5 seconds to answer. Okay, please show your answers, class. The correct answer is letter A. The force of the fish points back while the force of the water points forward. Okay, last question. From the given situation in question number 4, which of the following statements is true? Is it letter A, the fish produced the action force while the water produced the reaction force? Letter B, the fish produced the reaction force while the water produced the action force? Letter C, the fish produced both action and reaction forces? Or letter D, the water produced both action and reaction forces? Okay, time's up. Please show your answers. The correct answer is A. The fish produced the action force while the water produced the reaction force. Okay, class. How many got it all right? How many got the perfect score? Okay, congratulations, Miss Marvelita Diaz. Marvelita. How many got lower than 3? Still, congratulations, Miss Christine. Judging from your scores, I think that we're going to have a very interactive lecture discussion ahead. Class, the third law of motion is the law of interaction. It states that for every action force, there is an equal and opposite in direction reaction force. Newton's third law is concerned with forces acting in pairs, and when we say in pairs, how many forces are there? Ms. Riza?
2, sir.
Correct. They are in pairs, so there must be 2 forces interacting against each other. What are the forces? These forces? How can you identify them? Ms. Marvelita?
Yes, sir. I believe that these 2 forces are the action and reaction forces, sir.
You can identify them through a free body diagram that visualizes the perpendicular and horizontal direction of the force.
Very good. These forces are action and reaction forces. So if we have an action and reaction forces, are they acting upon one body or not? Miss Christine?
No, sir. These forces act upon two different bodies.
Exactly. These forces act upon two different bodies. If so, by how much and in what direction? Yes, Miss Perlita? Can we have a helping hand? Miss Marvelita, can you answer?
Yes, sir. If they are equal in magnitude, it means these forces exert the same amount of force, and they tend to act in different directions, sir.
Okay. So, I think from your perspective locations, I want you to stand up and find the wall, extend your arms up against the wall, and push as hard as you can. Come back after performing the activity. So this is an activity class.
Done, sir.
Okay. So how did you feel? How did you
A
feel?
little
Class?
tight.
Okay. Were you able to knock down the wall?
No, sir.
No.
No, sir.
Did you fall when you tried to push as hard as you can up against the wall?
No, sir.
No, sir.
No, sir.
It is because he exerted a force against the wall while the wall exerted the same amount of force back at you. What could possibly happen if the wall was not exerting that same force back at you? Anyone can answer? Yes, Miss Marvelita?
We would fall over, sir.
Yes, exactly. When the wall is not exerting the same amount of force as yours, you definitely fall over. This is actually the concept of the third law of motion. Now that you can almost grasp the correct concept of the third law of motion, here's teacher Maharlika to explain it further. But before that, I want to show you a video in order for you to have a insight or a vague idea of what would teacher Maharlika discuss. Where's the tab? Class, can you see my screen?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Please. So here's the video. I want you to watch this video in order for you to have a quick insight of what teacher Maharlika would discuss.
What happens when two objects interact with each other? What happens when you place an object on the table? The object exerts a force on the table, and the subject exerts an upward force on the object. There are two forces that result from this interaction: a force on the table and a force on the object. The magnitudes of the two forces are the same, but the directions are opposite. These forces are called as action and reaction forces. The force exerted by the object on the table was an action force, and the force exerted by the table on the object is the reaction force. What we saw here is nothing but a display of the Newton's third law of motion. Every action has an equal and opposite reaction. That's how simple the third law is. Every action has an equal and opposite reaction. It means that when two objects interact, there is a force on each object. The magnitude of force on the first object equals the magnitude of force on the second one. And what about the direction? The direction of force on the first object is opposite to the direction of force on the second one. Let's talk about more examples. While the frog is swimming, it pushes the water back and the water pushes its body forward. Now let me ask you a question. Say a bird is flying upwards. Will the Newton's third law apply here? Sometimes the third law is not so obvious. You'd probably say that the bird is the only object here and there's no second object. But that's not correct. The wings of the bird push the air downwards and the air pushes the bird upwards. Action and reaction forces make it possible for birds to fly. We'll take one last example to understand something very interesting about the third law. What happens when a gun is fired? You're right. It exerts a forward force on the bullet. And the bullet exerts an equal and opposite reaction force on the gun. And this exists in recoil of the gun. A perfect example of Newton's third law. But hold on. If the force exerted by the gun on the bullet is the same as the force exerted by the bullet on the gun, then why doesn't the gun recoil with the same acceleration as the bullet? The gun recoils, yes, but it doesn't recoil at the same acceleration as the bullet, right? Same magnitude of forces, but different accelerations. Why do you think this happens? Okay, so if your concept of the second law of motion was clear, you wouldn't really be surprised with this. The second law of motion says that the force is the product of the object's mass and acceleration. Or the acceleration of the object is equal to the force over its mass. What does this tell us? Yes, if the mass is more, then the acceleration will be less. In this example, the mass of the gun is much more than that of the bullet. Hence, the acceleration of the rifle is lesser than that of the bullet. If you're in a boat and step out of it onto the land, there are two forces involved. You pushing the boat behind and the boat pushing you forward. And that's why you see the boat go behind when you go forward. Now let's say a sailor jumps off a huge ship. The sailor does apply a force on the ship, and the ship also applies a force on the sailor. But do you think the ship will accelerate as much as the sailor? Not really. And I think you know why.
Okay, so I think you have now a quick insight about what Teacher Maharlika would discuss. So may I now give Teacher Maharlika to explain the third law of motion further.
Okay, thank you, Sir Joshua, for that very interactive prior knowledge activation. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning.
Good morning, ma'am. Good morning, ma'am.
Yes, thank you. Can you see my screen now? Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Good. Class, as Sir Joshua have mentioned earlier, Newton's third law is concerned with forces acting in pairs. Remember, a force is what, Marvelita?
A push or a pull, ma'am?
Correct. Force is either a push or a pull that is enacted upon an object or a body. Forces result from interactions between two bodies. And what are these bodies again? We are referring to, may I call Christine?
A body is where an action force or reaction force acts upon, ma'am.
All right. Exactly. These bodies can be anything, an object or human. And as you have mentioned, from the definition of the third law of motion, for every action force, there is an equal amount of force and in an opposite direction of reaction force. This means that one cannot exist without the other. Same thing goes when a reaction can never happen without an action taking place. On this note, one object or body serves as the source of the action force and the other acts as a source of reaction force. As you can see in my illustration on my screen, the hand or the human hand acts as the source of the action force, while the wall acts as the source of the reaction force. So we have two forces right there. And here in the right side figure, you can see that there's two bodies there. What are those bodies? The action force where that acts on the first body is the book, and then the second body is the table, creating a reaction force. Okay. Also, when we say every action has an equal and opposite reaction, this means that every force is met with an opposing force of equal strength. I repeat, opposing direction with equal strength. So as you can see, there are two arrows here pointing towards the wall and one pointing towards the human. And here on the other, one is downwards, one is downwards, and one is upwards. Okay?
Yes,
The
ma'am.
direction of these forces could either be a vertical pair of forces, like this one, on the right one, the table one, and a horizontal pair of forces on the left side here, the hand on the wall. Okay? What you need to remember, class, is just these two forces never go the same way. I repeat, they never go the same way. They're always opposite in direction. So I want to let you remember always that the principles of the third law of motion first, the action-reaction forces act on two different bodies. Second, they have an equal magnitude. And the third, they act on opposite direction. All right? So based on the activity you performed earlier with Sir Joshua, assuming that this is you against the wall. Look at the picture. Assuming that this is you against the wall, can you tell the bodies that interacted, Perlita? Perlita, are you there?
Oh, yes, ma'am. Ma'am, the first body is myself and the other one is the wall.
Correct. The first body is yourself. Let me get my pen. The first body is yourself, and then the second body is the wall. All right? That's good. Very good. Now, can you identify what force acts on the first body and the second body as well? Is Riza already there? Okay, Marvelita, you answer the question. Can you tell?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, go on.
Action force acts on the first body, ma'am, while reaction force acts on the second body.
All right, that's good. The action force acts on this body and the reaction force acts on the wall. Okay, remember, the first body is the action force and the second body is the reaction force. Great. So now, for example, if you are exerting a 50 Newton, let me get my pen. Okay. 50 Newton here. You have a 50 Newton force here. how much force does the wall should exert upon you? Or yeah, how much force should the wall should exert upon you? And to which direction? Christine.
Ma'am, if I exert a force of 50 newtons, ma'am, it means that the wall or the second object is also exerting the same magnitude, which is 50 newtons. With regards to the direction of the force of action is toward the wall, while the force of reaction will be pointing towards me, ma'am.
Very good. So, if this is 50 newtons, for example, the magnitude of the reaction should also be 50 newtons because according to the principle of the law of interaction, the action and reaction forces should always be equal in magnitude. All right? So, you're almost at the point of mastering this lesson. Now, let's check how much you truly understand the lesson. It's your turn now to give me your own practical application of the third law of motion and identify the action-reaction pair of forces as well as its properties. We begin with you, Miss Perlita.
Ma'am, an application I can suggest is walking on pavements or on the ground.
Okay, how does walking justify the law of interaction here?
Ma'am, when you walk on pavements or on the streets or on the ground, your walking creates friction. Since friction exists, you exert a backward horizontal force on the ground, and as the third law explains, the ground exerts an equal and opposite force on you. That's why we are able to move forward.
Oh, that's a good explanation, Miss Perlita. Next, Miss Marvelita.
Ma'am, for
Okay.
example, my coffee cup that is resting on the table exerts a force on my table. My table, in contrast, is exerting that same amount of force on my coffee cup. Let's say that my coffee cup is exerting a force of 5 Newton. My coffee cup is not moving. So my table must be exerting an equal force of 5 Newton in the opposite direction. Because those forces are equal, my coffee cup stands still.
All right. That's a good one, too, Miss Marvelita. Thank you. How about you, Miss Christine?
Ma'am, a deflated balloon, ma'am.
Okay. A deflated balloon? All right.
Yes,
So, which is the action force there and which is the reaction force?
when the air of the balloon rushes down towards the knotted part to escape, the balloon tends to fly away, ma'am. Well, the action force there, ma'am, is the air trying to escape from the balloon, and the reaction force is the balloon flying away due to air pushing it upward, ma'am.
Oh, good job on explaining, Miss Christine. Again, is there anyone else who would like to share their own ideas and practical application? What about can you still give me another, Miss Perlita? Oh, Riza, you're already there. Come on, you can give your own practical application now.
Ma'am, for example, my cup of coffee that is resting on my table.
Mhm.
My table exerts a force. In contrast,
Mhm.
the amount of force is also exerted on coffee cup.
All right, very good. Miss Marvelita, how about you? Can you give another one?
Ma'am, paddling a canoe. When you
Okay.
exert the paddle into the water, you push it backward. That is
Mhm.
the action. And the reaction is the force of the water on the paddle to move the canoe forward.
Excellent. You all provided great examples of this practical application of the law of interaction. I think we're now ready to make a generalization of the subject matter. Okay? Now, I have an activity for you here. Let's try to summarize what we have learned today. Okay, this is the direction. As I call your name, please read the sentence and fill in the missing word. I repeat, as I call your name, please read the sentence and fill in the missing word or words there, okay? Miss Christine, please read and answer number 1.
Yes, ma'am. Number 1. A force is due to an interaction between two objects or bodies, ma'am.
Very good. Number 2, next, Miss Perlita, can you accomplish number 2?
Oh, yes, ma'am. Number 2, one object serves as the source of an blank and the other acts as a source of the blank force. So, one object serves as the source of an action and the other acts as a source of the reaction force.
Great. Miss Marvelita, can you do number 3? Miss Marvelita, are you still there? Your mic is off, Miss Marvelita. Yes.
Number 3. In any blank, there is an action-reaction pair of forces. In any interaction, there is an action-reaction pair of forces.
Oh. Okay, very good. Now, please do the next one, Miss Riza. Are you still there? Miss Riza? Okay, can you help her? Maybe Perlita? Please help her. Number 3? Or number 4, I mean.
Okay, ma'am. These two forces are equal in blank but opposite in blank, and one cannot exist without the other force. These two forces are equal in magnitude but opposite in direction, and one cannot exist without the other force, ma'am.
Great job, Miss Perlita. And finally, Miss Christine, please finish number 5.
Number 5. Lastly, forces come in blank, one being the action while the other is the reaction. Ma'am, lastly, forces come in pairs, one being the action while the other is the reaction.
Okay, very good class. You did a good job. I think you're now ready to move on to the more exciting part. I shall now give the floor to Ma'am Zarina for the continuation of this discussion. Ma'am Zarina, let me close my screen so you can share yours, okay?
Okay. Thank you, Mama Harlika. Thank you, Mama Harlika. That was a meaningful discussion. Good afternoon, class.
Good afternoon, ma'am.
Good afternoon, ma'am.
Excuse me, Mama Harlika. Can I share my
Yes,
screen?
okay. Just wait for a while. We're having trouble here, okay?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Okay, class, can you see my presentation now?
Not yet, ma'am.
Okay, you can share your screen now, Miss Perlita, or Miss Zarina, Ma'am Zarina.
Okay. Please wait patiently. Wait. Okay. Can you see the presentation now, guys? No, now, class?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Now, the law of interaction is manifested in everything, everywhere. You might not have realized before this discussion, but just by sitting on that chair, you are already exhibiting and manifesting the law of interaction. How? Simply because you are exerting a force on that chair downward, on downward direction, while the chair is exerting a force upward direction. That's why you're able to sit still.
The third law of motion may sound easy to comprehend, but do you know that a lot of students studying this law still get lost, especially when acceleration is involved? Okay, let's try the sample problem. Many people are familiar with the fact that the rifle recoils when fired. This recoil is the result of action-reaction force pairs. A gunpowder explosion creates hot gases which expand outward, allowing the rifle to push forward on the bullet. Consistent with Newton's third law of motion, the bullet pushes backwards upon the rifle. The acceleration of the recoiling rifle is letter A, greater than the acceleration of the bullet, B, smaller than the acceleration of the bullet, and C, the same size as the acceleration of the bullet. Now, what could be the answer? Anyone from the class?
Ma'am.
Okay, Miss Perlita.
Ma'am, letter C. The acceleration of the recoiling rifle is the same size as the acceleration of the bullet.
Do you all agree, class?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, how so? Anyone?
Ma'am, because the forces are the same and according to the second law of motion, force is directly proportional to the acceleration.
Well, this is a common mistake committed by the students. Though what you said is a fact, you might be missing something. Class, if forces are the same, it does not mean that acceleration should be the same. Since you use the second law of motion as your basis, you might have forgotten that the mass of the object should be considered as well. According to the law of accelerations, acceleration is inversely proportional to the mass of the object. What does this imply? Yes, Miss Marvelita?
Ma'am, that the heavier the object, the lesser the acceleration, ma'am.
Wait, class. Right. Right. In the given problem, I asked what was the acceleration of the recoiling rifle? Was it greater or lesser than the bullet acceleration? Let's compare. Okay. Let's compare the mass of the rifle versus the mass of the bullet. Which one is heavier and which one is lighter? Miss Risa, you may answer. Miss
Ma'am,
Risa,
the gun or the rifle is
Ma'am,
the rifle heavier than the bullets, ma'am.
That is correct. Therefore, what should be the right answer to the problem? Miss Christine, you can answer it.
Ma'am, letter B, ma'am.
Because
Ma'am, because since the heavier the mass means the smaller acceleration. And between the rifle and the bullet, the rifle or the gun has a heavier mass. Then we can say that the gun has a smaller acceleration than the bullet, ma'am.
very good. Actually, this is a perfect example of the third law of motion. Can you identify the action-reaction pair of forces? Yes, Miss Perlita.
Ma'am, the situation given, when the gun is fired, the gun exerted an action force on the bullet, while the bullet exerted a reaction force through the recoil of the gun.
That's right. It looks like you really understand how the third law of motion works. Since we're done with the discussion, are there any more questions or clarification, class?
None, ma'am.
None, ma'am.
Okay. Okay then, let's see how much you've benefited from this lecture discussion of the lesson. I prepared a 15 question online quiz for you to answer. Please open the Google form link I have provided in our GC and answer the questions. That will be good for 10 minutes since all it takes is comprehension of the subject matter. Please open the
Google form I have forwarded in RGC. The timer will start now. Class, there's 3 more minutes left. Please start reviewing your answers. The Google form closes in 1 minute. Okay, class. Time's up. You may now submit your responses and check
Ma'am,
your
done, ma'am.
scores. Okay.
And ma'am.
Are you all done?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So, how was it?
Ma'am,
Was
okay
okay.
lang.
How many passed the quiz? Please raise your hand. Okay, we had a good results. Your scores manifest a clear validation of your learnings of the subject matter. Before I let you go, class, please check your assignment I have forwarded in our GC. Your assignment is to make a comic strip to show your knowledge on the general principles of motion. The comic strip should discuss how Newton's law of motion can be best applied to daily life situations as practical application of your knowledge. Do it in letter-size bond paper and submit through the Google Classroom. That will be due on May 10 of this year. So, any questions about the assignment or about our lesson?
None, ma'am.
All right. On behalf of my fellow pre-service teachers, we thank you for your active participation in today's session. Goodbye, class. You may now leave the classroom.
Goodbye and thank you, teacher.
Bye and thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, class.
Bye, ma'am.
See you around. Thank you for your active participation.
Okay.